Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time this morning to be with us. We're really excited about this morning. This is our first conference that we've put on as a statewide engagement center. I'm Dawn McGrath. I'm the executive director for InSource. I have with me Natalie Hicks, who is the assistant director, and Jill Summerlott's helping with the dials on the Zoom. So we have recently become a statewide family engagement center. InSource is an organization that's been around for, it'll be 50 years next year. But this is the first year that we ventured out beyond special ed to really appreciate family engagement in the general population. And so this is an exciting time for us. The model that we put in place that allowed us to get the award is one that invests deeply in 5 school sites and 5 school districts. But just know how grateful we are to have Sherry with us this morning. Sherry?
Really a pleasure. I've been doing family engagement work for a really long time, and I'm eager to help anybody that I can to move this work forward. It's so important for all of us in our own communities and lives. So I'm just really excited to be here and share with you a little bit of what I know. So I will go ahead and get started. Oops. So we are going to be talking about the foundations of family engagement. We're going to start today by really looking at why this work is so important, why it even matters. And to get things started, I'd love it if you could name where you are and what your role is, so I can get a sense of who is in the room today. Just want to get to know you a little bit better. So name where you are and your role. And I'll share mine with you in just a minute. And I'll go back to the screen and I'll just share with you who I am so you guys can understand my context. I spent 15 years at the Alabama Parent Information and Resource Center. You can probably tell from my accent that I am not from Alabama. I'm actually from California. My ex-husband picked that. And so we lived in Mobile, Alabama. And I actually started my work at the Parent Training and Information Center when they got their very first PERC grant, the Parent Information and Resource Center. PERCs were statewide family engagement centers. There was one in every state. Some states actually had two. And our mission was really to build the capacity to do family and community engagement partnerships at the school level with schools that had large concentrations of low income and minority families. I don't know if any of you know Jackie Garvey. She was the PERC director in Indiana when I was doing my work in Alabama. We had a really strong network, and sadly, our grants all got zero funded at the same time. So I had to find a new job. So I moved to Washington, D.C., and I took a position at National PTA. I spent 4 years there managing all of their family engagement programs. And then I got recruited away by Scholastic. And my first 3 years at Scholastic, I was full-time staff. So I traveled around the country doing training and PD for teachers all over the US. I actually did some consulting then too, and a little bit of work over in Australia. But after 3 years, that became a consulting position, and I really needed the benefits. So I took a position with NAFSCI. I'd been one of the founding board members, and they offered me a position as full-time staff. So NAFSCI is the National Association for Family, School, and Community Engagement. We're a national nonprofit membership association that's focused on advancing the mission of engaging every family in their children's education. And in my role at NAFSCI, I plan our national conference, which is the National Assembly, and that is going to be in Denver this year in October and in New Orleans next year. I hope all of you can come. I also do a lot of our webinars and training, and I do a lot of work with the statewide family engagement centers. Statewide family engagement centers are very similar to the PERCs, like the one I used to run, and there aren't as many of them. Unfortunately, it hasn't been funded at a level yet where we have one in every state. So it is a super competitive grant, and Indiana is so lucky to have a center in their state. And I'm real excited about the work that Dawn and Jill and Natalie are doing, because it's really going to advance family engagement, not just in the districts they're working in, but as they learn from those districts and develop models and scale up across the state. It's going to help families and children across Indiana. So it's very exciting. I had two kids because the first one tricked me into thinking they were quiet and well behaved. My second child was not. But they're grown men now who still live in Alabama. And I have the most beautiful car in the world, which you can see there. So that's a little bit about me and my background. I see a lot of you have used the Q&A box to put your information in there. Thank you so much. It's really interesting to see the diversity of perspectives that we have here today. So that's very exciting. So we'll go ahead and get started. Today, our learning outcomes. First, I want everyone to be on the same page around the why, understanding why it's so important that we use family engagement as a strategy to achieve student success. One thing you'll learn from me is that family engagement is not my goal. It shouldn't be your goal. It shouldn't be anybody's goal. Our goal is not to engage families. Our goal is for students to have the best possible outcomes. And we get there when we use family engagement as a strategy. So we're going to talk a little bit about why that matters. We're also going to talk about defining family engagement. So I understand you have a definition. I'm going to share with you a couple others, and we'll have an opportunity to talk in small groups around what the differences between those are and how we bring those definitions to life. And then finally, we'll spend some time talking about some of the essential practices that are necessary to achieve family engagement in education. So as we go through this, if you have questions, please put those in the Q&A box. I would love to answer those questions as they come up. So Dawn, Jill, and Natalie, if you could keep an eye on that, and if you see any questions, stop me in case I miss them, so we can address those questions as they arise. So here's our agenda today. We did our welcome and opening. Now we're going to move into the why. We're going to set some context. We're going to look at those essential practices, and then we'll wrap up. Sound good? Excellent. Okay, so understanding the why. I'm going to share with you a little metaphor that we use to help people understand how important it is for everyone to be engaged in a child's education. This metaphor came from some research that NAFSCI did with the Frameworks Institute. In our research, we looked at the reasons why people don't really support the policies and practices we know we need to be effective in engaging all families. Often, the way we communicate about family engagement tends to depress the support that we know that we need. So they developed this metaphor and then tested it in the public. And this metaphor is like waving a magic wand. When we read this aloud to people, or we share it, or we allude to it, people see lots of different roles for everyone involved in a child's education. So the metaphor is, just as a space launch relies on a team of people working together to plan and complete a mission, families, schools, and communities can work together to launch children's learning. This involves planning successful learning by collaborating at the start of the school year. And when families, schools, and communities work together throughout the year on their shared mission, learning takes off. We have people on street interviews where we ask people how families could be engaged in their children's education. And they said, I don't know, that doesn't even make sense. There's too many families. Teachers don't have time for that. And then we shared this metaphor with them and asked them again. And they were like, well, yeah, everybody has a role to play. It's important for everybody to be involved in a child's education. Wherever children go, there are opportunities to reinforce their learning. So families play an important part of that. Besides, families know their kids better than anyone else. So I just thought that would be a nice way to get things started today and sort of set the table as we begin this conversation. Now, I want to share with you a little video that was recorded during the pandemic. This is a video that was recorded by Dr. Karen Mapp. If you're not yet familiar with Dr. Mapp, you probably will be, because she is a researcher that is widely known in this field. She was responsible for the development of the dual capacity building framework, which we're also going to talk a little bit about today. And she's a lecturer and professor at Harvard University who runs a Family Engagement Institute twice a year in the fall and in the summer that is Really, really intense. It's totally worth it, but it's also Harvard, so it's real expensive. But she recorded this video talking with a teacher about the difference that engaging families makes when it comes to her classroom practices. So let's take a listen. When we finish, we're going to put you in some breakout rooms to talk to each other about what you heard in this video. And then when you come back, we're going to ask you to share out. So let's get started.
Annie, as a teacher, I certainly want to give you an opportunity to talk about, and you know, we usually have a lot of teachers on the call to talk about, you know, why are you so committed to engaging with families, and what do you get out of it? You know, sometimes we hear teachers say, you know, oh, this is one more thing to put on my plate. Oh, you know, this is going to be too much, and I'm already doing all these things already. We get a lot of that sometimes as pushback, and I totally get it because teachers are doing a lot. But why is this important to you? What does it offer you as a teacher?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many reasons that family engagement is important to me. And the first one is that families are the experts on their child. And I'm committed to knowing my students deeply. I'm committed to sparking their curiosity and having them be intellectually engaged. And partnerships with families, I believe, really make that possible. Families are what give us insight into a child's passions, into their strengths, into their areas of growth, and into like the social and emotional health of that child. So to me, that's baseline. Another reason family engagement is so important to me is because there's so much expertise among the families. So in a normal school year, I try to get as many experts into the classroom as possible. And as a teacher of Black and Brown students, I think it's really like vital for us to widen this idea of who the teacher is and who the experts are. And we need more people of color in front of our students. We need more men in front of our students. I teach at the elementary level. And so at the beginning of every year, I take an inventory and I ask families, like, what can you come in and teach us this year? What can you share with us? And, you know, with the assumption that we're going to go partially remote or fully remote this year, I actually think that there are more opportunities than ever to bring those experts and all the families into our classroom space, because it's kind of easier in some ways right now. And then Karen, you asked, like, what does it do for me? And there certainly is a personal component to it. One of the things that I love about working with young people is it is authentic. Kids are real. So they don't hide their joys, they don't hide their frustrations, they don't hide their anger. And I like that. I like being in a real kind of raw space every day. And it feeds me to have those kind of intense relationships with kids. And I like having those relationships with families too. It honestly, it feeds me as a human to be able to interact with adults that way. And I think that when students and teachers and parents are in partnership and interacting authentically, students feel that viscerally. And it provides emotional support for them, and it provides like spiritual support as well. And I think that when we do that and when our students witness that, we're saying to our students, we've got you, we love you, and you know, we're all on your team.
Annie, could you just say just a little bit, just one more thing I want to add in to follow up. So what would you say to teachers who are reticent about engaging with families? I mean, and you said a lot about how it fills you up, right? You said it feeds me as a human. I love that. But are there a couple of other tidbits for those people who might still be a little hesitant about this that you can share?
Yeah, I think that in the long run, deep family relationships make the job easier and make the job more joyful. Teaching is so hard. It is so exhausting. And there is going to be a point in every school year where we're going to have some kind of difficult conversation with a parent. And when we have done the foundational work of building that relationship, those conversations are not difficult. They're saying, hey, I'm concerned about this. Are you noticing this? Rather than making a phone call that I feel nervous about, that the parent doesn't want to receive. It's to me that work of building that relationship, that's like the first 2 months of school. And that first 2 months of school helps you for the rest of the school year. So to me, I just think it pays off so much to have those relationships from the beginning.
I really love that video because she does such a great job of articulating the difference it makes for an individual teacher when they are working to engage families in meaningful ways, when they spend time building those relationships with them. And as Annie said, it is not easy work. And so anything you can do to make your job easier is better for you, right? We're going to talk a little bit more about the research behind that in a minute. But first, I'd love to put you guys into a few breakout rooms so you can talk with each other about your takeaways from the conversation between Annie and Dr. Mapp. Welcome back, everyone. We would love to hear some of the things that you talked about while you were in your groups. Hi, Tiara.
Hello, how are you?
I'm living the dream. How are you?
I am doing great. Thank you for asking.
You have the most beautiful name. Hey, what were you guys talking about in your group? Can you share with us?
I sure can. We were talking about empowering our parents and co-creating between our parents and our teachers. We were speaking about leveling the playing field almost as to where you are building trust with the parent because we understand that the parent knows their child. They know their student, and they, by welcoming and having difficult conversations, you're now setting up for the ability to, assist the student all the way around.
Mhm.
It's a matter of welcoming the parent into the conversation where we are saying we don't know everything. We have the academics, but culturally, whatever is going on in each student, it looks different, but we need to have the conversation. And we also talked about teaching our parents, teaching our teachers how to have the conversation, as well as our parents, empowering them to how to be advocates for their students.
Oh, Tiara, your group was on it. That's really that dual capacity building piece. You have to build the capacity of educators while you build the capacity of families so that way they're both equipped to do that work with each other. I love it. Hi, Tabitha, Fabiana, Brittany, thank you for joining us today. Would you like to share what you talked about in your groups?
So we kind of diverged just a little bit, and we were really talking about how we all pretty much love the idea that families they know their child best, and really honoring that and seeing all families as experts and bringing them to the table.
Mm-hmm.
But on the flip side, what about those families who are not English speakers? How are we inviting them into the conversation? How are we honoring them and valuing their part? And I thought that was a really critical part because not everybody speaks English, and we need to break those barriers down too so that all families are invited, encouraged, and honored.
Yeah, that's a really important part. Families come from all over. They look different, they sound different, they have different backgrounds and educational experiences themselves. There are some families who are hesitant to come and participate in school events and activities because school is not a happy place for them. And so they don't think that you have anything that they really want to participate in. So there are a lot of challenges to overcome to do this work. It's really sounds like a really rich conversation. Thank you for sharing that with us. Anyone else want to share what you did in your groups?
We really just focused on that teacher perspective, and Tabitha, all of your wonderful people at Warren. So we talked about just that teacher perspective and how, we have the student, but that student is a product of two parents, and how it's just very important to bring those parents into the school system and really hear their perspective and things from their lens.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Thank you. Anyone else? We will get back to it then. And now we're going to focus on setting the context. So this is where I'm going to do a deeper dive into the research around family engagement and why this is so important to the work that we do. This book came out a long, long time ago. I was just starting my career when this book came out. That's how old I am. This book was a synthesis of the research that had been done in the 40 years prior to the publishing. And what they found in the research overwhelmingly in every study was that the evidence was positive and convincing that families have a major influence on their children's achievement in school and in life. So there was no disputing the fact that families play an important role after this book came out. But I remember when this book came out and we all said, well, yeah, we all believe that. We get it. That's true. But how do we do it? And so this was written by Ann Henderson and Karen Mapp. So they put out another book in 2026. This book is Beyond the Bake Sale. And this is, I call this my Bible of family engagement. I really cut my teeth on this book and I still use it. I refer to it all the time. It is full of strategies, practical strategies schools and teachers can use to really engage families in meaningful ways. It's available on Amazon. I know it's an older book now, but still really, really, really good. If you don't have this already and you're really interested in this work, I do recommend it. Then there was another book that came out. I think this was 2012. I don't know. Time has no meaning anymore. But when this book came out, it really shifted a lot of the work that was happening in the field as well. So this was a really important study, a longitudinal study that was done by Anthony Breich and his colleagues. And they were in Chicago. It's where I live now. So they were in Chicago and they studied schools that had been low performing, but transformed into high performing schools and then sustained that over time. So they were really looking at what are the supports that need to be in place for these schools to turn around. And they found there are 5 supports that are all absolutely essential. If they are not there, it is very unlikely that schools will be able to turn around or to sustain that high quality performance. So the first support they found was leadership as the driver for change. And this is really important. I noticed we had maybe 1 or 2 superintendents and principals on this. That's fantastic because leadership really creates the culture and climate that says this work is important. We should all be doing these things. Leadership, and we all know this to be true, leadership can make or break programs that happen in a school. If a school leader does not support something, it is not likely to be successful. So we've got to have leadership on board with this. The other interesting thing about this finding, though, was it's not just believing in this and encouraging people on your staff to do it, it's also a distributive model of leadership. So it's really about building up the staff and the families to do this work together and then engaging them in leadership roles as well. The second important thing they found was professional capacity. So I will share with you a little known secret, then that is family engagement is not the most important thing that kids need to learn. It isn't. As much as I love it and it's my career and I believe strongly in it, it's not the number one thing that kids need to learn. The number one thing kids need to learn is access to high quality instruction. If they are missing that, it doesn't really even matter how engaged their families are. They still don't have all of the opportunities to learn. So we have to have teachers in the classroom who understand what they're teaching and how to teach it. The professional capacity is a really important part of this work. Teachers play a critical role. The third thing they found, which was my favorite, was the parent and community ties. And actually what they found was in schools that had lower parent involvement, even if they had higher levels of everything else, they weren't likely to be successful. For example, in the study, they also found that when there was low parent involvement, they only saw an increase of 10% in their reading scores. When the parent involvement level was high, they saw a 40% increase. So it really is an important part of this work. And families do matter when it comes to their children's education. Just to finish up the other essential supports that are necessary, the fourth one was a student-centered learning climate. So this means everything they do in these successful schools is focused on student learning. If there's not a connection to the learning, they don't want to do it. It's a waste of their time. So like they don't do I'm trying to think, it's been so long since I had children. They don't do like the wrapping paper sales, for example, to raise money for the school unless they can embed some sort of educational component in it. There has to be a connection to the learning for students for these schools to really focus on them. And then the fifth thing is instructional guidance. And that means making sure that we're teaching the curriculum with fidelity, that all of our systems and programs are aligned and working together. And all of these things are pointing to that white triangle in the bluish rectangle. That's instructional core. And that's really where learning happens. So you can see these things interact with each other, but they all focus on that one thing. And that's what he turned up in this study. This is Organizing Schools for Improvement, Lessons from Chicago is a book that's available on Amazon, and family and community engagement is like a big part of it, but not the whole thing. So if you're really interested in a researchy kind of book around school improvement, I do recommend this one. It's a pretty good one. So there was a new book that came out. I mentioned that Henderson and Mapp had written A New Wave of Evidence and Beyond the Bake Sale. And then 2 years ago, I think, they put out this new book, Everyone Wins, which is a book available through Scholastic, but it's also available on Amazon. This is a really good book. This is another synthesis of research. So now they're looking at the past 50 years of research, and they found that there are a lot of positive outcomes for a lot of different people when families are engaged in their children's education. When we think about the benefits to students, we know that when families are engaged, kids get higher grades and they get higher test scores. This is really important for us, especially as we're looking at school performance, because we tend to judge our schools by the student grades and test scores, right? So we want everyone to know how hard you're working and what a great job you're doing. It's important that kids get good grades and test scores. They also found that students have better attendance and better engagement in class when their families are engaged. And I know you're going to hear today about a school that is focusing on attendance and family engagement as an issue. That's a really great strategy. There's actually some very interesting research coming out now from Attendance Works and Learning Heroes about the connection between family engagement and student attendance. And Remember, the most important thing that kids need to learn is access to high quality instruction. If you're not in school and in class, you don't get that access. So whether you are having attendance issues or you're tardy every day, that's minutes that you are denied that instruction, and that has an effect on student outcomes. So we need to get families engaged so that we can ensure kids are in the classroom every day, ready to learn. Kids also have better positive attitudes and behavior. So another challenge is kids who have behavior problems tend to be out of school quite a bit. I know because I had one of those. He had a lot of behavior challenges and he was sent home quite often. And when kids have behavior challenges and they're sent out of the classroom, they don't get that access to instruction. They're missing that. And so they tend to fall farther and farther behind. And the farther behind they fall, the more their attitude suffers and their behaviors increase. And so it's a terrible cycle once they get trapped in it, where they're missing out and they get sent home, and then they come back and they act out, and then they get sent home, and round we go. Engaging with families, especially if you engage with them early in the year to build that trusting, respectful relationship, allows you to have conversations about the things that are happening in the classroom and the ways you can work together to manage those behaviors. Kids have a greater sense of efficacy and self-esteem, which is another really important part of keeping kids in school. We also have a dropout problem in many schools across our country. And we know that when families are engaged, kids are more likely to stay engaged. They have better self-esteem, and they're more likely to stay in school and finish school, and then have higher graduation rates and post-secondary rates. But it's not just students that benefit. We also see benefits for educators. So many educators often teach in classrooms where the kids and the families don't look anything like them. And they may not even be familiar with the culture of some of the students in their classrooms. So what we see is when they spend the time to build relationships with families, it helps shift them from a deficit-based mindset to an asset-based mindset, where they see families not as a problem or something that needs to be dealt with, but really as a resource that can help them help their kids. And really, I believe teachers get into this field and they do this work because they love the kids and they want them to do well and be successful. So any tool we can give them to help them do that is going to be good for them. It also gives them better or increased multicultural awareness and appreciation. They learn about students' different cultures, and it helps them appreciate them more. They have more success in engaging and motivating students, regardless of the background, once they are able to build these trusting, respectful relationships. They get more input from families. And this is really important too, because sometimes kids may be struggling with things that their families know about, but their teachers do not. And families may not feel comfortable sharing with teachers they don't know what those struggles might be. But when they do know the teacher and they do have a relationship with them, it's a lot easier to pick up the phone and call and say, look, Tyler's going to be having these problems today. We got off to a rocky start. Here's what's going on. You know, those conversations just become so much easier. And then finally, teachers have stronger morale and professional satisfaction. And this is really, really great and super important. We are going through a crisis in education now. Teachers are leaving this field faster than ever. And honestly, many of them feel beaten down and put upon, and truly, I can't blame them sometimes. But we know that when they engage with families, they have much greater morale and satisfaction with their jobs, and they are less likely to leave the classroom. And again, the only reason I do this work is so kids will be successful. And the most important thing kids need is that high quality instruction. So we really need good teachers to stay in their classrooms and continue to teach the children. In our research with the Frameworks Institute, we also uncovered that many educators are less interested in the benefit to families, because really they're mostly interested in how is this going to help the students I teach and how is it going to make my job easier. But there are some benefits to families I think it's important to talk about. We know that when families are engaged in their children's education, they have stronger parent-child relationships. It's easier to have conversations about what your kids are learning and why education is important when you understand what your kids are learning. They have better rapport with teachers and school staff, so it helps build their own social network, really. They get a greater understanding of their child's progress and how they can help with that. It's really important for families to know what their kids need to know and be able to do and the progress they're making to get there so that they can be supportive and help them. And they have more knowledge and skill in advocating for their child. So one thing we haven't really talked about yet is the difference between family engagement at the elementary level and family engagement at the secondary level. And it is wildly different. It's worlds apart. A family at the elementary level can be very hands-on and help with their kids with homework and help them with their learning and those kinds of things. But by the time kids get to middle and high school, that actually becomes counterproductive. We don't really want families helping their kids with their chemistry homework or their biology homework or things like that. It is not good for anyone, believe me. But there are other roles that families play at the secondary level. Rather than being so hands-on, they become more of a supporter, an advocate, and a monitor. So making sure their kids are taking appropriate classes, advocating for them to get into the classes that they think they need, advocating for them with them, showing them how to advocate for themselves as they get to be young adults is a really important role for families. And then finally, there's increased deep and supportive social connections, not just with people in the school, but also with other families as they become more engaged and get to know other families who have students in the school. And then finally, there are wins for the actual school. They have a more positive school climate, so everybody feels better about going into their building. It feels like a really good place when you walk in the door. One of the things I still do with Scholastic in my consulting with them is school improvement assessments. So we go to schools, we do a walk through the campus, we do a bunch of surveys, we look at their tech and their documents that they share with families. What we're really looking at is it a culture and a climate that welcomes all families, not just into the building, but also into the learning? Those are two really important things that schools can do. So you can tell, I do walkthroughs of school campuses. I probably do 15 or 20 different school assessment reports every year. And when I walk into a building, I can tell as soon as I can almost tell before I get in the building, when I'm standing outside the front door and I'm looking at it, I can tell if it's a building that welcomes all families. You guys, this is a little aside, but if you get a chance, go to your school, pretend you've never been there before, and stand about 30 feet away from the front door and see what the first thing is that catches your eye on the outside of your building. If it is a sign with like legal code or a gun with a red circle and a line through it, like those are not super welcoming messages. And if that's the first thing you notice, then your school climate may need some attention. But if the first thing you notice is a sign that says welcome and it's in multiple languages so that all the families will see it and know that you're speaking to them, that's a really good indicator that the school is a school that's working to have a positive climate. Another benefit for school is we see higher morale and greater retention of teachers. You know, I talked already about how important classroom teachers are and how important it is to have high quality teachers. When you get them in there and then they decide to leave and you have to start from scratch and get somebody new in there, it takes a lot of time to get them up to speed and help them really take in the culture of the building. So it's really best if we can keep good teachers in the classroom and we don't have to worry about trying to recruit new ones. They also tend to have improved facilities, better curriculum, and higher quality programs. And that's because there's support from the community for the school, not just from the families of the kids who go there, but from the community as a whole. And there's a better reputation and more support from the community. So this is a really good book. I do recommend it if you get a chance. It's easy to read. It's not super big and not as researchy as that one by Anthony Brake. which is kind of hard to read. So I want to talk for a second about some of the newer research. And this is actually just a picture of the cover of the report from 2017, but Learning Heroes does this study every single year. This is a really, really important research that happens year after year after year. And this is research where they do panels. So they have, it's very scientific. They have panels that come from all over the world, I'm sorry, all over the country. They're made up of different stakeholders. So they have parents who are parents of kids that are in elementary school, middle school, high school, suburban, urban, rural, just all different levels, low income, affluent, bunch of families. And they ask them two really important questions, among a few others. But the two important questions they ask first is, do you think your child is at or above grade level? And I want you guys in the chat box, because I think most of you have chat privileges now, in the chat box, guess what percentage of families say, yes, my child is at or above grade level. If you can't use the chat, you can use the Q&A. Okay, we got some here. 50, 75, 55, 45, 50, 60, 10. Allison said 95%. Jasmine said 40, 40, 80. Allison, you are the closest. It is actually 90% of all families think that their kids are at or above grade level in reading and in math. So if you look at this chart, you can see that the actual number is significantly lower. It's closer to 40% for all families, and it's lower than that. It's under 20% for some subgroups. This is a huge problem for us. One of the things I hear all the time in this work is we try real hard to engage families, but they never want to participate in anything we offer. They never come. We have these amazing events and activities. And I would say, first of all, family engagement doesn't always happen at school first. But secondly, just because you're having events and activities doesn't mean families are going to participate. There's an amazing researcher named Kathy Hoover Dempsey who retired a few years ago from Vanderbilt. She said families need three things to be engaged. The first thing they need is a sense of invitation. So somebody has to make them feel like they're really wanted, like you really, really want them to participate. The second thing they need is they have to have a sense of self-efficacy. They have to believe they can do whatever it is you're asking them to do. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the dual capacity building piece. But the third thing they need is they have to believe that it's going to help their kid. So here's the problem that I see with our education systems right now. Most of us have opportunities for families to come to school and be engaged in events like literacy night, for example. And it's often, let's use elementary school first as our example. It's often a school-wide K through 5 school. And so the event they have is for all families K through 5. And they bring them in, and kids are there and they're running around doing whatever the activity is. And we talk to families a little bit and tell them some of the things that they can do at home. And then at the end of the night, we send them off and we hope that families do those things. When I think about this particular study and I think about the way that we do those events, what strikes me is families don't always believe going to an event like that is going to help their kid, especially if they're in 4th or 5th grade and they've been to that event. Because when families have kids in kindergarten, they go to everything you offer. They're real excited to be there, if it's their first kid usually. So they go to all your events, and they even keep it up in 1st and 2nd grade, sometimes even in 3rd grade. But by 4th and 5th grade, we see that number taper way off, and families aren't coming anymore. And part of the reason why is because it's the same thing you always do. And they feel like they've seen it. They already know what you're going to do there. And another reason why is they don't really see how that's going to help their kid improve their reading or math. So we really need to be more intentional about inviting families to events that really do help them see the connection between what you're doing with them and how their kid will do better in school. Another interesting question that they ask in this study is, what could schools do to help you help your child? And I know this is a very small font, so it's hard to see, but the number one answer from families was detailed explanation of what my child is expected to learn this year. And the number two answer, which I find even more interesting, is activities to improve English or math skills, easily sorted by areas in which my child needs help. So they want things, they want to know what their kids need to know and be able to do, and they want things that can help them help their children. Just something to be aware of. So I will pause for a second and see if anybody has any questions about the research. And you can put those in the chat box, or you can unmute yourself if you want to. I'm fine with that as well. Any questions at all?
Sherry, I would just like to ask everyone, if you're using the chat box, will you please move it from the host and panelists? If you'll please click onto everyone so everybody could see those things. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. That's a great reminder. Okay, we're going to move into defining family engagement. So I'm going to share with you a couple of definitions that I have. We'll also look at the definition that InSource gave me, and then we're going to go into breakout rooms and talk about how we can bring these definitions to life. So this first definition I'm going to share with you, this was developed actually a while ago by Karen Mapp and a couple of other researchers and people who are doing this work out in the field. So this is I use this definition still. I think it's pretty solid. This definition is: family engagement is any way a child's adult caretaker, biological parents, foster parents, siblings, grandparents, etc., at home, at school, and in the community effectively support learning and healthy development. So what I like about this definition is it really does define adult caretaker, because first of all, our families are not typically two biological parents with 2.5 children and a dog and a picket fence. That's just not really what our families look like anymore. They're all different. They have lots of different looks and shapes. And sometimes it's foster parents, sometimes it's grandparents, sometimes they live with their biological parents, but they work multiple low-wage jobs. And maybe it's those fictive kin. Those are the people that are our aunties or uncles that aren't really technically related to us, but are still a big part of our family. Sometimes it's those people who are playing this role in a child's life. It's just important to remember that even if biological parents are in the home, they're not always available when their kids are available. So families are much broader than they used to be. The second important thing is the location: at home, at school, and in the community. And that's because we don't shut off our learning valve when we walk out of the schoolhouse door. Wherever kids go, there are opportunities for them to reinforce things that have happened in the classroom. And then the final thing I like about this one is it's talking about supporting learning and supporting healthy development, because that's a really important role for all of us to play. It's just vital that kids have the opportunity to grow and thrive. The second definition I want to share with you, this one came from Connecticut. And this one I love because this was developed by many people. So what the state of Connecticut did, my friend Judy Carson works there. What she did was she organizes these coffee chats that happen locally, and then there's regional levels, and then there's a state level. And at the local levels, they challenged the coffee chatters to get together and come up with a definition of family engagement they all agreed on. And then they took the local definitions and they shared those at their regional coffee chats. And then they took that and came up with one definition everybody in that region agreed on. And then all the regions took theirs to the state level and they all discussed them, and they came up with this definition that everybody in the state of Connecticut kind of had a voice in creating. Ivelisse, I'm so glad that you are from Connecticut. Your state's doing an amazing job. So this definition is: family engagement is a full, equal, and equitable partnership among families, educators, and community partners to promote children's learning and development from birth through college and career. This one's a really strong definition because, again, you're talking about lots of different people, families, educators, and community partners, and they're all working together with a similar goal to support learning and development. I also like that it really says equal and equitable, because those are not the same thing, even though many people are very confused about that. We've done some research on equity, and it's shocking the findings that we have. But this is a very, very solid definition, and a lot of people, not just in Connecticut, a lot of people around the country have adopted this one. And here's the Indiana definition that I'm told you guys, many of you had a voice in creating. This is a dynamic collaboration among students, families, educators, and community members to promote children's learning and full development. This is accomplished through trust relationships, co-created goals, shared leadership, and a welcoming community environment and fully accessible resources. What I love about this one is, first of all, the dynamic collaboration piece is so interesting to me. That is such a great way to think about this. I also like that this definition includes students and the other two didn't. That's really nice piece. And that you're spelling out trusting relationships, co-created goals, and shared leadership. Those are really important parts of making sure that everybody feels like a part of this learning environment. So these are three very solid definitions. I would feel comfortable using any one of those three. I like aspects of all of them. Let's go into our breakout rooms and talk about how we can bring these definitions to life. If you know what your definition is and you want to see that become a part of your school community, how are you going to make that happen? You don't have to solve this entire thing right now, but if you could come up with one or two strategies to share with each other, I think that'd be real helpful. So let's open up the breakout rooms again.
Oh,
Oh,
I was in the middle of saying
oh
something.
man.
Hi, everyone.
Bye.
Does anybody want to share any interesting ideas you came up with or strategies that could help you bring these definitions to life?
Tabitha and I both said that the Indiana definition was the best. Just saying.
You know, that's a great segue because while you guys were in your groups, we did our own little group. And I think Don's going to explain how you guys came up with that Indiana definition, because it's really good.
Well, the ladies will remember because Jennifer was there and Tabitha was there. And the thing that I was sharing to our group was how we really made that an Indiana definition, that we were sensitive to some words that maybe were red flags politically. And that if you can say it in a way where people can embrace the idea without turning off people for political reasons, that, you know, that was part of what we intended to do. So, yeah.
Which is very, very smart. We learned that in our research with frameworks as well. Jasmine, you have your hand up. Do you want to go next?
Oh, again, sorry. For me, I would say, because we talked about in our group, trust and meeting our boundaries with our families. One thing that I brought up was one of our families had a letter that got sent home, and it was in Spanish, English, and Haitian Creole. And she was like, which one do I do? Which one do I do? And I was like, the native language, whichever one you think you could do. And she was like, well, I'm doing the Spanish one then. And I was like, and that's fine. I don't know, meeting our families and getting there, that was awesome. Like that actually made me feel good about, hey, we are trying to make a difference in meeting our parents where they're at. And building trust. We did talk about that a lot in our group, about building trust and being there for our families and knowing them, even if it's just like, I'll use my kiddos as an example. Like, I know what Jessie did today. Jessie made an A in class or whatever. And having mom or dad or grandparents know, like, oh, okay, you know my kiddos, you know me, and now I could come to you or anything like that. So it was that.
Love that. Thank you, Jasmine. Who wants to go next? Anyone else want to share?
I was in the group with Jasmine, and I just want to give a kudos to Warren because I just said how they take the time to understand what the barriers are for their families. The barrier may have been language. So, okay, we'll make sure through equity that everyone has a chance to succeed. So no matter what language you speak, we have what you need. In order to do that, you need to speak to your parents, speak to your families, and understand what the barrier is instead of just assuming that they just don't want to be involved.
Mm-hmm.
So a shout out to Warren. I love them. I said, you guys are all right.
I second that. Totally agree. Anyone else want to share?
We talked about starting early. And so really trying to get them at that preschool. I had a preschool teacher, Felicia, I think, is that right, in there? And we have a pretty robust preschool at our corporation as well. And so Brittany's kind of started some preschool advocacy groups with that group. And then we're trying to do open centers and bring parents in with kids before they come to school so that we can help build that trust and just show that partnership before they even start kindergarten. And so we're not successful yet. We have really high hopes, but that's something that we definitely want to do. And we had the opportunity to meet face to face and have all of our preschool. We have 76 preschoolers right now, and all but 2 came in to do an actual meeting and just learn about us and kind of what our philosophy is at school. And so that's our approach right now. But we'll hope that it's kind of all new. So we're hoping the newness doesn't wear off, but we can keep that up.
I think it's so smart to start when kids are super young and build the expectation. But one of the challenges with that is you have to make sure that you sustain that at other grade levels, because as those kids get older and their families move up, that's going to be their expectation, is that there's going to be these relationship building opportunities with schools and educators, which is a good problem to have, because that's really, in a perfect world, that's what we would see. I love it. Very smart to start in preschool, Jennifer. Anyone else want to share?
Yeah, so Laura and I spoke, and she brought up something that they do that's really cool, that has a lot of opportunity to reach a lot of families in a short amount of time. And so what they do is it's called Lunch and Learn, and she may want to talk more about this, but it's virtual and it's just for 30 minutes and it's on Zoom. So parents can just jump on and they record it, and they'll do like a welcome, or they'll talk about how to prepare for parent-teacher conferences, or they'll talk about how to access grades and our communication systems and things like that. And then after it's over, they upload it to their school website, so families that were not able to attend can still watch it. And so I just thought that was an easy, quick way to involve parents, a lot of parents at once, even though it's not face to face, but at least the information is reaching them.
One of the reasons why I agree to do opportunities like this, these kinds of training sessions for centers like Dawn's, is because I learn something new every time I do this. And that is a genius strategy. That is so smart. Making it a virtual opportunity so people can participate wherever they are is really great. There are a lot of barriers that prevent people from coming to school buildings, and then recording those. So even if people can't participate from a distance at that time, it's still available to them. They're short, so it's not a burden to try and watch all of them. Genius. Really, really smart. And you're almost creating like a virtual library of resources. So then when you see a family is experiencing a problem, maybe checking their children's grades, you can email them and shoot them a link to that video so that you don't have to recreate something every time you see a parent or a family is struggling with something, and you already have some resources for it. So smart. Lacey, who did you say told you about that?
Laura, but I don't know her last name.
Well, Laura, out there. Oh, there you are.
Yeah. And no one, even if you do know it, no one likes to say it. It's a mouthful. But I really can't take credit. That really has been literally, Allison, you used my words. the brainchild behind that. So Tabitha Jackson is our lead facilitator for the district for Warren Township, and she's really taken that and run with it. And Lacey did a great job explaining it, but we really have tried to make them timely related to what's going on in the district. So next week's is related to parent-teacher conferences, which is coming up shortly right after that. So just helping parents prepare for that. So we are really excited. We've only had one so far, but we're just really excited about the potential and spreading the word so that more and more people will take advantage of that.
Tabitha, props to you. That is super, super smart. You're doing it right. And this is another reason why we like to do these breakout rooms so that everybody gets an opportunity to learn from Tabitha. Fantastic. Well, let's move on to the difference between involvement and engagement, because I think this is another important part of the conversation. Again, I've been doing this for, I don't know, let's say 50 years, a long, long, long time. And when we first started doing family engagement work, when the PERC centers first got funded, we were all about parent involvement. That was all we did. We talked about it. We did programs for it. It was all parent involvement all day. But we gradually began to realize, first of all, parent is an exclusive word. It is not inclusive. And we wanted to make sure that everybody that was in a child's life felt they had a role to play. So we gradually switched to family involvement. But then we also began to realize that involvement is very different from engagement. You can just show up and sit at a meeting and be involved in the meeting just because you're there, but you're not really engaged. You're not doing anything with it. You don't have a sense of ownership over it. I like to think of the difference between involvement and engagement the way I think about dating, because I'm back in the dating pool now. And so there's a huge difference in me getting involved with someone or, God forbid, getting engaged to someone. So when it comes to family engagement, I'm saying put a ring on it. That's all I'm saying. We need to make sure we're focusing on that engagement and not so much on the involvement, which is the more traditional route. And I also think of this as a spectrum, right? It starts with being involved. That's where you are when you initially kick things off. But then you move to engagement where you're doing things and you're feeling a little ownership. And finally, you can move to a place where you're feeling very empowered. And that's when we really see magic start to happen, where there's true partnership between families and schools, and everybody feels empowered to do whatever it takes to support children. One thing I'd like to also share with you is how I define engaged families, because I don't think we actually spend a lot of time really thinking about this. We talk about family engagement, but what does it even look like if a family is engaged? I think that means families understand what their children need to know and be able to do. They know the progress that they're making to get there. They know what they can do at home to help advance that progress. And then they do that. They do some action. That's how I define engaged families. When it comes to engaging schools, I think they really welcome families, not just into the building, but also into the learning practice. So families understand what their kids need to know and be able to do. They communicate in lots of different ways that are two-way. So they have the opportunity not just to share information with families, but also to receive information with families and then engage with them around that information. They inform families about what their kids are learning so they understand where they're at, and then they empower them to do those things at home. As we think about integrating families, you really need to be thinking about what can families do at home each week to support the learning. So again, this is so much easier in the elementary schools. One strategy you could do tomorrow to help your elementary school teachers could send out like a weekly summary or blast that says, here's what we're working on this week, and here are 3 questions you can ask your child. Because the first question families ask their kids when their kids come home from school is, what did you learn today? And what do kids say when their families ask them that? My kids always said nothing. Yeah, I can see, Jasmine, your kids say that too. They say nothing. I didn't learn anything. And often that's a conversation killer. At that point, there isn't anywhere to go. Or I don't know, Evelise, you're right. At that point, parents don't know, families don't know where to go from there. You don't know how to ask a follow-up question if you don't really know what they were learning. But if you give families 3 questions, like this week we're learning about dinosaurs. So ask your child what a Tyrannosaurus Rex eats, if that's a real dinosaur. I don't know, it's been a long time, but that's a different conversation. Then families are asking questions about things that have happened in the classroom, so that even if they don't know the answer to that, it makes kids reflect back on something specific that they did learn. At the secondary level, that's very different. Then it might be questions about, like, how did you do on your math test today? And you've got access to the parent portal, so you can check those grades and monitor what's going on. You can ask them, did you get that paper turned in that I know needed to go in? Those kinds of questions, but something to support the learning each week. Also thinking about how they can support, monitor, and advocate on behalf of their child's learning. So giving families the tools they need to understand at the secondary level in particular, to understand what are the diploma options that are available in Indiana? What does my child need to do to leave school with a diploma that's going to let my child pursue their dreams, whatever those dreams are? And are they taking the right classes to get there for that? If not, what's missing? What do we need to do to get them in there? And then thinking about how you can use all of your communication channels to convey information to families. It needs to be, there's no silver bullet. There's no one way you can send out information that's going to reach every family. Some work with more families than others, but they don't work with all families. Some families prefer email, some prefer text, some don't like either one and really just want to have a phone call. So surveying families at the beginning of the year helps with this, so you can kind of get a sense of what they like, but you really do have to communicate on multiple platforms multiple times. So as you're thinking about all of these things and really getting into this work, where do you start? We're going to do a Mentimeter poll. I don't know if you're familiar with Menti. You can take a picture of this QR code and it'll take you right to it, or you can go to menti.com and type in this code, 86398074. And I'm going to stop sharing for a second, and I'll put this Menti code in the chat box so that you can see that maybe.
Can you go back to the QR code? I wasn't fast enough.
Oh yeah, no worries. It's in the chat box too. So let me share that QR code one more time. And if you just type in menti.com, there's a place at the top of the page where you can type in the code if you want to do it, on your computer and not on your phone. Okay, I'm going to go to the Menti now. And then hang on one second, if I can find it. Hold on. There's a lot of screens open. Okay. So the first question on the poll is, all families have dreams for their children and want the best for them. When you see that, you can answer either strongly disagree, disagree, agree, or strongly agree. All families have dreams for their children and want the best for them. So, and this is anonymous, so you can be honest. I see we have most people strongly agree with this. A few people just agree. One person strongly disagrees. There's always an outlier. That's good because it gives us an opportunity to talk about this. So when we think about this core belief, this is a core belief that is foundational to doing this work. This is absolutely true. All families do have dreams for their children and want the best for them. And typically when I do this activity, I do it in a room with people, usually a mix of teachers and parents. And we have them do this on anonymous ballots, and then we mix it all up and we go to different corners that represent these answers. So we can see when you look around the room, how many people agree and how many people disagree and where people have really strong feelings. And then we talk about why someone might disagree with this core belief. And often we hear people disagree with this because of experiences they've had with individual parents or families where parents have not responded. Maybe they don't ever answer their emails or their phone calls, or they never come up to school and participate. Often teachers say, you know, I offer all kinds of opportunities for families to be engaged, and they don't take advantage of any of those. So clearly they don't care. What we know from the research is that all families do care. They all have dreams for their children. They all want the best for them. At the very least, I want them to pay for the nursing home I've got picked out on the beach in Carlsbad, because I mean, I'm ready to go. But families have dreams. The challenge is they don't always share those with you. If you don't have trusting, respectful relationships with families, they're not going to tell you what their dreams are for the people they love most in the world. That is not something they feel comfortable with or they want to do. Also, you may never meet those families. They may never, ever, ever come up to school for any reason. Maybe it's because of experiences they've had themselves. Maybe it's because they just don't have time. For whatever reason it is, just because you don't meet them or you don't know them doesn't mean they have hopes and dreams for their children and want the best for them. There is a very small, very small percentage of families, like less than 1%, where families might suffer from mental health issues or substance abuse issues. But the reason we use the word families is because it's not just the biological parents. There are other adult caregivers in that child's life who can fill this role. So it's important that we all understand that and recognize that. That's not even a thing anymore. Families care. They want their kids to do well. We should move on from that. Let's do number 2. Number 2 is all families have the capacity to support their children's learning. So I'll give you a minute to vote on that. Can you guys see that? Oh, yeah. Okay, here it comes. I was like, why isn't it working? Well, we've got some diverse opinions this time for sure. So I'll give you another 30 seconds. So interesting, more people disagree with this core belief than agree with it. This one is an interesting one. I think this one has all families have the capacity to support their children's learning has 3 important words. The first important word in this core belief is families. So remember, we are not just talking about biological parents. We're talking about adult caregivers in a child's life, right? So there is somebody in that child's life who has the capacity to support their learning. The second important word is capacity. So capacity, to me, when I think of capacity, I think of my Mini Cooper. Honestly, I think of my Mini Cooper all the time. That's really all I think about. But my Mini Cooper has the capacity to take me anywhere I want to go. I can go anywhere. I mean, essentially, I'm going from gas station to gas station, but I'll get there because my Mini Cooper will take me. But it won't take me unless I put gas in my tank. Families are like Mini Coopers. They've got gas tanks, and we haven't done a real good job of putting gas in their tanks. They can't be expected to help support their children's learning if they don't know what their children are learning. It's up to us to build that capacity, to fill those tanks so that they can do the things we want them to do to help their children be more successful. And the last important word here is support. So one thing it's important to realize is we're not asking families to reteach anything that's happened in the classroom. That's not their role. Their role is really to support what happens in the classroom. So there is a book I talked about at the very beginning called A New Wave of Evidence, the first book written by Henderson and Mapp, where they synthesized the research over 40 years around family engagement. One of the studies they point to is my favorite study in the whole world. This was a group of students from the South Texas border. They lived right on the border in a border town, and There were kids in that school who graduated in the top 1% of their class. A couple of them were valedictorians. They were wildly successful, and they were children of seasonal migrant farm workers. Their families did not speak any English. Most of them had no education at all. Oh, I didn't realize I could do that. Most of them had no education at all. They did not finish school themselves. They couldn't read and write even in their own native language. And they never, ever, ever went to school to participate in school events and activities. But this researcher was really interested in how they supported their children's education because their children were wildly successful. So they went to the school first and they asked the teachers in this school, how did these families support their children's education? Because their kids did so well. And the teacher said, oh, they didn't. We don't even know those families. They didn't care about their children's education. They didn't come to any of the events or activities that we offered. They just weren't there. So then the researcher went to talk to the families, and he said to the families, your kids did so well. How did you support your children's education? And the family said, oh, that's easy. When our kids weren't in school, they were with us out in the fields picking fruit. And the whole time we were picking fruit and they were picking fruit, we were all picking fruit together. We were saying, this is terrible, right? This is a horrible job. The only way you can get out of this field is if you get an education. And so those kids internalized that. That motivated them not just to get an education, but to graduate at the top of their class. They were really successful. So when we talk about families having the capacity to support their children's learning, those families had the capacity. They motivated their kids in ways the schools never dreamed of. When I think about family engagement, I imagine it's like an iceberg, right? And what you see in the school is just the tip of that iceberg. You just see a tiny portion of it. But what families actually do with their kids is all under that surface. All things we never actually have any access to or information about. So this core belief is absolutely true. All families have the capacity to support their children's learning, and it's up to us to really help them understand how they can support their children's learning in really meaningful ways. Let's do number 3. This is super fun. Families and school and program staff should be equal partners. I can't wait to see what everyone thinks. Oh, right from the get-go, people are agreeing with this one. Ooh, we have one from the Russian judge. Excellent. I'm super glad that person strongly disagreed with this. Michelle, you want to say something? I see you have your hand.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, Sherry, hi. I don't have the capability to vote. It tells me that chat is disabled. And so I had one of the IT gurus to come over here. We were unable to fix that.
Okay, so Jill, if you're still out there, can you make sure that Michelle is a panelist now so that she can join the chat? And then Jill, Michelle, did you see the Menti code that was in the chat? I don't know if that worked for you. I'll repost it just in case.
It did.
Okay.
Thank you.
I don't know why your voting isn't working. I'm sorry about that. Well, let's talk about this one. So clearly, almost everybody agrees with this. We have 3 people that strongly disagree with this. What's interesting when you do this in real life with people in the room and you have parents and teachers together is I often get 4 different responses. 2 from the families and 2 from the teachers. So when families are in the room and we ask this question or we talk about this core belief, they say one of 2 things. Either they say, I'm sorry, nobody in the school will ever know my child as well as I know my child, and I'm clearly the expert in Tyler, so my role is more important. Or they say, I didn't go to school and pay a boatload of money to learn how to teach children, and I don't even know what you're teaching, so clearly the teacher's job is more important. And teachers say one of 2 things. Either they say, I went to school and paid a boatload of money to learn how to teach your children. I know how to teach them and you do not, so my role is more important. Or they say, you know, I've only got your kids for a couple of hours every day. I don't really have them and it's just for 1 year and then they're going to move on. And you have your child all the time because honestly, parenting is like a prison sentence and you get 18 years with good behavior and then you're out. But parents are there the whole time and teachers come and go. So clearly a parent's role is more important. But what we know from the research is this does not mean our roles are the same. Our roles are equally important, but very different. So the family's role is as important as the teacher's role, even though they do different things. And that's why we need to be equal partners. We need to be on the same level so we can work together to make sure that children have every opportunity to succeed. Now, one thing I want to say about this core belief and the last one, if you think that schools and families should be equal partners, but you don't really think all families have the capacity to support their children's learning, you're putting families in a really bad position because you're kind of saying, I think we should be partners, but I really don't think you can do it. And families can tell. And that's another reason why many families have broken trust with schools. So it's really important to embrace these core beliefs that our roles are different but equal. And we both have a really important role to play in my children's life. And if you show me how, you give me the tools that I need, I can support their learning in meaningful ways. I have the capacity to do it. Let's do the last one. The responsibility for building and sustaining homeschool partnerships rests primarily on school program staff, especially school and program leaders. It's so much fun to watch these numbers change. Interesting. So people still voting, but it looks like we've got more disagrees than agrees on this one. Huh. Starting to catch up. Now it's kind of evenly divided. Well, let's talk about this core belief. This one's a tricky one because I just finished saying we should be equal partners. That's the number one response I get for when I ask people why they disagree with this belief. We just finished talking about how important it is to be equal partners. This core belief does not have anything to do with that. This core belief means schools, especially school leaders, have to create a culture and a climate where they build and sustain these partnerships. There is a power differential in our relationships. Families don't have the power that schools have. Schools have resources, they've got knowledge and expertise, they've got people who are paid to be there. Families don't have any of that. And if you're waiting for an individual family member to knock on the door and say, hi, I'm Tyler's mom, I'm here to be a partner in his education, how are we going to get started? That will never happen. That just isn't a thing. So it's important for schools to create the pathways to partnerships. So making sure that those opportunities exist for families to be meaningful partners in their children's education is a really important function of the school itself, and school leaders in particular, because they're the ones who can create that culture and climate among the staff that says, this is important work that we're all going to do. This is a really important core belief because we really have to understand that family engagement doesn't just happen organically without putting the systems and structures in place to make it possible for families to be engaged in meaningful ways. And that's why school and program leaders play such an important part in this work. All right, those are the core beliefs. Anybody have any questions about those? If you want to learn more about them, they all came out of Beyond the Bake Sale, that book I mentioned earlier today, my favorite family engagement book after all these years. Really important resource. And those core beliefs really are foundational to doing this work. If you don't hold those core beliefs in your heart, it's going to be a lot harder for you to get this work done. So I encourage everyone to do some more research on them, read those books. But next, we're going to move into talking about some essential practices that we can use to really engage all families. And the one I want to start with is actually trust, because I think trust is foundational to doing this work. You cannot work with families if they don't trust you. So part of our challenge is their trust has been broken over time. Probably not because of anything any of you did, but it is often the case that families have broken trust before they even get to you, either because they had really bad experiences in school themselves when they were children, and so they don't think of school as a happy place, or because they have kids who maybe have a lot of challenges or issues. I know my youngest son, Tyler, he had attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. He had a learning disability and written expression. He had behavior challenges. And I got calls every day from the school that he wouldn't sit still. He wouldn't stop talking. He wouldn't stop tapping his pencils on the desk. My son, Tyler, is the most entertaining person in the entire world. He's a professional musician now. When he was little, he told me he couldn't stop tapping his pencils because he always heard music in his head and he had to let it out. Well, that didn't work very well in a classroom setting. And so it was upsetting for teachers, and I got constant complaints about Tyler's behavior. What that does over time to a family is it really damages the trust that they have in the school, because if all you ever hear are negative things about the person you love the most in the world, you start to think maybe people don't like him. Maybe they don't really want him in their class or in their school. And then you don't really like them because that's the person you love the most. So it is a terrible cycle. And we have to start our work on family engagement by building trust. The book that I mentioned earlier, the work that Anthony Breich and his colleagues did in Chicago, they actually looked at relational trust. And what they found was not all schools with high levels of trust will improve. So trust alone isn't going to solve your problems. But if there's little or no relational trust, you have practically no chance of improving. So it is an important ingredient, not the only one, but a really important one. So I'm going to share with you a little video from the Flamboyant Foundation of a parent talking about her experience in her child's school. And I want you to listen for evidence of trust. Listen for instances where there's high regard, where there's confidence or integrity or personal regard that the family member, the parent, feels from the school. And then we'll talk a little bit about what we see in the video.
Well, immediately after the home visit, I was then invited to a back to school night they were having in Stanton. They gave me the little flyer. I was like, well, we're having a back to school night. It's from this time to this time. Bring the kids, like a meet and greet the teachers and everyone that was going to be there. But one thing I can say about, Stanton, period, is that it is constant communication, something I never had, something I completely enjoy. And it's not just negative communication, it's constant positive communication. I can be here at home, at work, anywhere, and one of my teachers would send me a text. Or I used to love it, Miss Lucas would send pictures. Take pictures of them doing classwork, and you'll see, look how my Tanae, well, I call her Bird. The school calls her Bird, which I love because it's like a community. They adopted her nickname. So she would send me a text like, look at Bird, she's having a wonderful day today, and she's doing good. But in saying that, that allowed me to hear. I put a trust in Miss Lucas for doing that. So no matter what she said, how she had to say it, what the information is, it made it easier for me to receive it from her, because she had built this communication, this trust that I've never had. You know, so I tell people now, friendship. You know what I'm saying? We're not friends to talk every single day, but she's a person that I will always hold in a high regard. She will always have my respect. I really respect Miss Lucas, and I value her so much, because not just her, but all the teachers, but like she was the first one to really extend herself to me. And I would get the text, and then one day Tanae had a bad day, and she called me, and I was expecting to hear something good. Oh, you know, she got good on her test, so she did read. And she was like, well, we had a bit of an issue today. I'm like, for real? What happened? Well, you know, Tanae did X, Y, and Z. And I didn't get defensive. I didn't get, well, what do you do? Or what did I actually sat back and I listened, and I received the information. You know, and I processed the information. For me, that was something different, because at that point in time, I felt it like, why am I not getting mad? Because normally when you call me on the phone and you telling me something about my child did this, I'm naturally on the defense, like, well, what did you do to make my child do this? Or who was messing with her in class, because my baby's a good baby. But in this time it was different. And I don't know, it's because of the positive, you know, feedback she gives me every day, the friendship we brought. It just made, when she was telling me what was going on, I took a breath, I stopped, and I listened. You know, and then I was like, we actually got to a page where we worked together. I said, well, you know what, since she's having a bad day, you know, can you put her on the phone? You know, and I spoke with her on the phone, and I let her know that me and Miss Lucas are working together. We are a team, you know, and if she asks you to do something, you need to treat it as if mommy is asking you to do something. So if she asks you to sit down, you need to sit down. And there was no more problems with Tanae.
I just love that video so much. That's Miss Kaya from Stanton Elementary School, just outside of, or just inside Washington, D.C. in the Anacostia area. So what did you guys hear that was evidence of trust, the respect, confidence, integrity, and personal regard that Miss Kaya felt for Miss Lucas, or vice versa?
Well, what really stood out to me was that that interview was done in her living room on her couch. That was one of the first things that popped out to me. So that alone right there is trust. She's comfortable with the school coming in to her home. And now she's going to talk about why she trusts them. And if I trust you, welcome to my home. So I thought that was huge.
Yeah. Tiara?
Yes, I also noticed that she was in her home, and I was thinking, is this a home visit? Is this what this is going to be, that home visit where the school comes in? I love that she said the school uses her child's nickname. So it's like, you make sure that my student feels welcome and that they feel like it's a community and it's an extension of your family inside the school. I love that the teacher you give me positive feedback. So when it's something negative, it gets my attention. I'm not defensive. I'm going, okay, we work together. So it's beautiful. And so together we will assist our student. It's not my student and me versus you. It's like, no, together we are making sure that you'll be successful. It's just a complete mind shift. I enjoyed the video. I would like to share it with my district. That was a great video.
Kisha also said, I loved that the parent said to the child, we are a team. That's really great. For those of you that want to share that video, it is available on YouTube. If you go to the Flamboyant YouTube channel, I think if you search Stanton Elementary School, it'll pop up. There's a whole list of videos. There's another really good one I wish we had time to watch today. We don't, where they show parent teacher conferences. They transition to group conferences, and they show parents in this classroom setting a SMART goal for their child and then learning how to administer DIBELS tests so that they can do that with their kids as their kids are working on their reading goals. So it's a great, yeah, Shailene, I'll actually look for the link to the video and see if I can find that real quick, and put that in the, if I don't find it before we get off today, I'll share it with Dawn and her team so that they can share it with all of you. So, okay, excellent. I will look for that when I get a chance, but that is one of the most powerful videos I think that I have ever seen, because it is a clear demonstration of a parent talking about how her attitude has changed. She said, you know, for the first time I sat back, I listened, I received the information, I processed it, and I thought about, why am I getting angry? Because often when families get these calls, they come back to the school and they're in a rage because you have said something about my baby and my baby is the best baby. And I mean, we've all been there. We love our children just like other families do. And you don't like to think that your child is being attacked and you want to retaliate. But this parent, because of the work that Miss Lucas did to build a relationship with her, didn't feel attacked. She felt like Miss Lucas was legitimately asking for some help. And so she was happy to help her. And it is, as Tiara said, a completely different shift in her mindset. And I love how Miss Kaya, the parent in the video, is able to articulate that in a way. And she talks a lot about how she got there. I think that's an important part of it too, because we tell teachers it's important to have trusting, respectful relationships with families, but we don't often tell them how. Yvette, I see your hand is up. Did you want to comment?
Yes, I love the fact that she told her daughter that we are a team. Because a lot of times, just like when parents, you know, sometimes a child will go to daddy and daddy will say no, so they'll go to mommy. And they play teachers like that also. They could do one thing at home and thinking that the rules are different at school. And for the mom to leverage that playing field to say, you know, we're a team, we work together. So you can't do one and then do the other. And I think that getting that understanding for the child was great.
Yvette, it's like you raised my son, Tyler. That's exactly what he would do. Oh no, the teacher said I don't need to do that this week. And if I don't have a relationship with the teacher and I can't check on that, of course I'm going to believe him. So yeah, that is a really important point. Thank you. So here are some strategies that teachers can use to build those trusting relationships. First of all, it's important to focus on strengths and highlight positives. Nobody likes to hear constant criticism. I know that I don't, and I don't think any of you would. So talking about what's working, what's going well, what your child or their child is doing well is a great way to start. I even think if you do have something negative, say it should be like a sandwich where you start with something really good or positive, then you say the critical thing, but then you finish up with another nice thing so that it's a little bit easier for families to take. Also listening, really actively listening to what families say and not just thinking about how you're going to respond to them as they're saying it. Making sure that they always feel welcome and comfortable communicating with you, that they understand how to reach you when you are not in class or when you have time available to respond to them. Those are really important parts of it as well. And then demonstrating that you care. I mean, that just goes so far in really helping families. I have this little trick that I learned. Yeah, I actually learned this when I was married, and I'm not married anymore, so I'm not saying it didn't work for that, but it really works well in schools. I call it the love bank. And this is where every time you say something positive or nice about a student to that student's family, it's a deposit in their love bank. This works for me now with my car. When people say something nice about my car, like, oh my God, I love that your car is bedazzled. It's so sparkly. It looks so nice. It really catches the sun well. I think what a smart, articulate person that is. I really like the way they put that together. They're fantastic. And I'm on board with whatever else they want to do. But when they say something critical or negative, like, wow, that's a lot of rhinestones on your car, you must be blinding the other drivers, I'm like, that's not helpful. And that really doesn't make me think you care about me or that you like my car. And then I start to question your judgment altogether. With students, it's the same way. If all we ever hear are negative things, we start to think you don't really care. And what happens in the love bank is every time someone says something positive or helpful, it's a deposit. When they say something negative or critical, it's a withdrawal. And the problem we have is often families get more withdrawals than deposits. And when that happens, they don't trust you and they don't like you. And so part of the problem that families may have when you get them is they've had more withdrawals than deposits before you even meet them. So it's real important that we should make 5 positive deposits into every person's love bank before we do a withdrawal. So that means early in the school year, you have to start by reaching out to families and saying positive things about their kids before you get to any problems when you're going to have to talk with them about something else that's come up. I find the love bank, I use this in my life every day. I sprinkle compliments like confetti wherever I go, and it just makes people happier. They feel better about seeing me when I do turn up. It just makes the world a little bit of a nicer place, I think. So there you go. It's a really great strategy to use. The chat box is really popping up and I haven't been able to keep up with it, but I think keep that up. Let's talk about another strategy really quickly because we're running short on time. So I mentioned early on when we started today that family engagement is not our goal. Family engagement is an instructional strategy to help students be more successful in school. And it's really important that we start to think about it this way. Often when we do school improvement plans or family engagement plans, things like that, we often use family engagement as one of our goals. We often say we're going to engage all families in 3 events, blah, blah, blah. It's not a goal, it's a strategy. It's going to help us help students do better in school. So this Flamboyant Foundation, which is an amazing organization. If you guys aren't familiar with them, they have a lot of resources on their website as well. This is one of the things that they have. This is their continuum of impact. On this, they list like all of the different things, different ways that families can be engaged. And if you start down on the end by the little schoolhouse, you see there are things like celebrations, fundraisers, potlucks, performances. These are things that families often enjoy, schools enjoy doing. We do them all the time, but there is very little impact on student outcomes when you're doing those things. If you move over the timeline to the things that are blue, and you see on the other end, you've got relationship building, academic partnering, home visits, ongoing communications, and modeling of learning supports and strategies. These are activities that will change outcomes for students. So the challenge we have is we tend to do more of the things on the lower end of the continuum of impact that have very few outcomes that are beneficial to students and fewer of the things that actually do have those good outcomes. Now, that doesn't mean you should stop doing potlucks or celebrations. You can still do those things. The key is how do you do those things and embed components that allow it to become capacity building events so that they do move farther along that continuum of impact. You can arrange your performances and showcases in a time where one of the schools I worked with told families they needed to be there 30 minutes before the performance started. And when they got there, they sent them to their child's classroom and the teachers modeled an activity they could do at home to support their children's learning before they got to go and see their little darlings perform. They were all really invested in being there because they wanted to watch the performance. We know families come if there's a student performance for the most part. So take advantage of those opportunities and make those events or activities more capacity building. Here is an example of what it looks like to do a capacity building event. So on the side with the blue and the yellow, this side, you will see often student learning is centered, but most of the things that you're doing in the traditional model of family engagement is telling families what the school is doing, and very little of it is families actually doing something. If you move over to the other one with all the writing, you should see that when you switch this up and become more of a capacity building event, you're doing more things with families. So families, it's very interactive. They're very hands-on. Families have opportunities to really practice a skill that they can do at home with their children. There are things that are done by families, so families do those skills once they get home. This is sort of a gradual release of responsibility model, which is a model we know works really, really, really well with children in the classroom. And so what we need to start thinking about families, the way we need to start thinking about them is start to think about families as learners. So if you want families to be engaged in ways that are going to really support better outcomes for students, you have to teach families the skills or strategies they can use at home to be effective in working with their children in whatever it is you want to do. At the elementary school, for example, that might be teaching families how to do an interactive read aloud with their child. So you model it for them, you give them an opportunity to practice it and get some feedback, and then they go home and do that with their child. At the secondary level, again, it's more challenging and you don't necessarily want them helping with homework, but maybe you do want them to understand how to access the parent portal, what to look for, and then what to do when they see things that are in there that are concerning. So you would model for them how to access that parent portal. You would give them an opportunity to practice it, maybe doing a scavenger hunt with a dummy account so they can look for specific information you've put in there in advance. And then they are prepared to go home and do that for their own child. It's just a really different way of thinking about family engagement that is more capacity building. And I keep talking about capacity building because that came from this dual capacity building framework for family school partnerships that was developed by Dr. Mapp and a few other researchers. She found the challenge is both educators and families haven't had a lot of formal opportunities to learn how to build trusting, respectful relationships and work in partnership with each other to support student success. One thing we know. Yes.
I'm sorry for the interruption. I'm afraid if you get too much further, the question will fall away. But we have a question, and it is, what would this look like in a preschool setting? Some relate and some do not.
So in a preschool setting, it's very similar. You decide what is it you want your kids to really do at home or do better on in your setting. So let's say it is maybe it's some pre-literacy stuff, and you want to do. It's been 30 years since I had a preschooler, so I'm not sure exactly what they do anymore, but let's say you're working on a specific goal or activity. What you want to do is you want to bring families in, you want to model for them how you do that in your classroom that they could do at home, and then give them the opportunity to practice it. So maybe it is recognizing shapes or colors, and you have some manipulatives or some cutout like shapes and colors that you want to share with them. Show them how to do the activity with those things, and then give them the opportunity to practice it. Also, this works so much better if children are not in the room, because children ruin everything. If the children are in the room, they become the center of attention. It becomes more about keeping them entertained and having them do these activities. When I worked at PTA, I was so proud of the family reading experience powered by Kindle. It was my program. I created it, and I decided to pilot that program in Albuquerque and Baltimore. And when I went to Albuquerque, we had it set up so the teachers were there. This was an event or an activity where they had 6 different stations, and each of the stations related to one of the domains of literacy. There was also a tech station because Kindle paid for it. But what happened was there were games at each station, and ideally the families would come in and play the games and then learn how and go home and do that with their kids. But what happened was the teachers felt more comfortable talking to the students. And so the families came and they brought their kids with them, and the teachers started talking directly to students. Students played the games. Parents became passive observers, and they were watching for a few minutes, and then they got out their phones to take pictures of their little darlings. And then before too long, half of them were playing Candy Crush. They weren't even paying attention anymore. And so they weren't going to go home and recreate these games. They hadn't really developed their own capacity to do that. So what I'm saying is, whatever it is you want your kids to do and whatever activity you do with them, find a different thing for kids to do. They can do a movie night, they can do other activities. When you get the parents in the room, and it doesn't have to be all night, it can be a very short thing, model for them the activity you want families to do, and then have them practice it. And while they practice it, that's when you build their sense of self-efficacy. You give them feedback and say, you're doing that really, really well. When you go home tonight, Jane is going to love that. She's really going to get a lot out of it. This is great. Or if they're not doing it right, you can gently redirect them so that they do correct that mistake. That builds that sense of self-efficacy. And remember, that's one of the 3 things Kathy Hoover Dempsey said families need to be really engaged in their children's learning. So I hope that answered the question. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what the activity is. It should be an activity that's going to advance student outcomes based on whatever is happening in your setting, whether it's preschool or elementary or middle or high.
You sharing?
Are there other questions?
I've not had anything posted other than that one.
Excellent. So it's really important that we also start to think about making the work we do in family engagement more systems focused and less individual teacher focused. Often if it's individual teacher focused, people feel overwhelmed, like they just don't have the capacity to do this type of work. They're busy, there's too much going on. Systemic family engagement really focuses on improving learning, and it's always linked to learning and development. It's aligned and coherent with your school improvement goals. So rather than developing individual family engagement goals, what you really need to be doing is looking at each one of your school's improvement goals and then asking yourself, how can families help us meet that goal? And then that becomes a strategy that's a part of that learning goal. Making sure that it's inclusive, that all of the people who are important in your community are a part of this, integrating it across your system so it's not a separate standalone thing, but family engagement is just a part of everything you do. And then shifting your school structures and cultures so that you're able to share power and resources with families, because families, for the most part, kind of powerless. Unless we give it to them, they don't really have a lot of power. And so when we can engage them and build these relationships with them, it really helps to build that. So, questions? I feel like I really rushed through the end there, but if you guys have questions about anything related to family engagement, I am happy to answer them.
I have one question.
Sure.
I just want, like, everything that we've been learning has been amazing. Like, I've been taking screenshots with my cell phone. Like, I want to go back and reread that and really study it, especially the books that you shared with us. So the question I have is, will we have access to this recording so that I can sit down again and re-listen and take clearer notes? Because there's a lot of good material here. Also, I like your Hello Kitty toaster. Just putting that out.
Oh, thank you. It makes Hello Kitty toast. It does like a little imprint. It makes me happy every morning. I assume that you'll get the recording, but in addition to that, I'll share my slides with InSource so that they can share those with you as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, Kisha, I see your question now. Will you receive a copy of the slides? Sure. I don't care. I really just want you guys to be able to do this work as the best you can, and anything I can do to help you, I am happy to do it. And so also I will share with you my email address, and mostly just another picture of my car because she's so beautiful and I love her so much. All the stars are rhinestones, you guys. So she really is bedazzled. But, oh, and that's my wrong email address. I should fix that. Nafsky, and it's Wilson S or Wilson's. There you go. I'll put it in the chat box too. So if you need to reach out to me at any time, feel free. I literally, this is what I do, and I'll do anything I can to help all of you be successful. Go Warren.
Ms. Wilson, I do want to say though, having this conference with you, I liked your presence, like positive vibes in the way that you just made some of us laugh. And I don't know, felt good. And I didn't feel like I was getting lectured. I didn't feel like, oh, okay, I got to sit here and take notes. You welcomed us and you made us feel good, and we talked about it. So I just want to say thank you. That's just my
Jasmine, you just made a huge deposit in my love bank. Thank you for that. It's a long day to sit in front of a computer, so I was trying to make it as engaging as I could. I really appreciate your feedback. I'm so glad that I got to meet all of you. The work you're doing is so important to the families in Indiana. So seriously, if there's anything I can do for you ever, feel free to email me, reach out anyway. I hope if you get a chance, you can come to one of our national assemblies. We're going to be featuring the SFECs, the Statewide Family Engagement Center. So Indiana will be there, and it's going to be super fun. Also, we have a disco ball that has karaoke, so that's going to be a good time. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Natalie,
Sherry. Thank you. Thank you. And we want to just take time to introduce, again, I'm sorry, I'm Natalie Hicks. I work with InSource, and thank you, Sherry, for showing us. Thank you for having little nuggets that we are going to remember from this presentation, from this conversation, because like she said, it really wasn't a webinar. It was a conversation. And we just need to remember to transition from family involvement to engagement to empowerment. And like you said, that's where the magic begins. So I want to take this time to introduce our model schools. We have 5 model schools that InSource has been working with for almost maybe a year now. A couple of us came on board in January, and we've been pushing through. So we're going to introduce our model schools so they can say hi. Let us know and let you guys know what they've been working on. And then we have a dynamic presenter that we're going to have. I guess you guys actually know her. She's the one that's been doing the Lunch and Learn. So Tabitha is awesome. But we're going to introduce everybody else and then have Tabitha come on and say a few things, give her presentation of what she wants to discuss. And if anybody else have any questions, just let us know as we continue this conversation. So do we have Gary on, a representative for Gary? If you are there, just unmute, introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Tiara Williams. I am proud to represent Gary Community School Corporation. We are an inner city district, and we are committed to the mission of improving literacy for all of our students. That's currently our initiative. We are at a very pivotal moment where we are inviting our parents and our community partners to join in with us to help us with we believe that reading starts at home. Okay, so we are helping them by partnering with our parents and our community members and learning the keys to literacy and the science of reading, and trying to give them things that they can do at home. So that's what we're working on in Gary.
Thank you, Tiara. What about Goshen? Do we have a representative from Goshen?
I'm here. Is Lori here? Or if Lori's not, I can jump in.
Go ahead, Jeremy.
All right, I'm Goshen Community Schools. I work with the family engagement team. I'm currently the district attendance coordinator officer. And our initiative is working with our current parent liaison that's established in our schools to support family engagement. And our big motto is shaping education together to achieve greatness. And we've done a lot of good work we have a stakeholder group of community members, and I've just been on the team a couple months now. Lori's been a little bit longer, but just really looking forward to learning from the other sites and what we can do.
Thank you. Let's go down a state to BCSC, Bartholomew.
Hi, I'm Heather Hester, and I'm in the Bartholomew Consolidated School Corporation, but we like to call it BCSC because it's easier, right? And we're located in Columbus, Indiana, which is nearly 45 minutes south of Indy and just north of Louisville. Our school district serves around 11,500 learners, inclusive of preschool all the way through 12th grade, and then adult ed programming. So it's a lot. We also are home to multinational manufacturing centers such as Cummins and Toyota. So it brings a lot of diversity to our community, which is reflected in our schools. I started this role officially in July and have spent a lot of time just learning, collaborating with the other LEAs in the grant work and attending community school events, conducting empathy interviews, and working with our stakeholder group to start to put together our strategy plan for BCSC. And our work is really focused on targeting middle schools and those transition years into middle school and out of middle school. And then also embedding targeted and strategic family engagement strategies into our professional development pathways that are provided for our district, our staff district-wide.
Thank you. Perry Central.
Hi, my name is Brittany Carter, and I am the Family Engagement Coordinator here at Perry Central. So we are all under one roof from preschool to 12th grade, and we serve around 1,280 students, I believe. We are very rural. There's not a whole lot around us. We have one mental health facility here in Perry County, which is definitely a challenge with the mental health challenges that we have here. Our focus for this grant is mostly attendance and building relationships and trust with families with a focus with the mental health piece. So far, I started this role in January. One of our first things we did was create our regional stakeholder group. And from that, one of the really big things we heard was that communication, there's too many different platforms. So we used funds to purchase a universal platform for all communication for teachers, administration, sports teams. All of our communication is done through this platform. So that's been super exciting. And really we're still kind of getting the rest into place. So that's all I got.
Thank you. And now we have Tabitha Jackson, and she is from MSD in Warren Township, and she's going to introduce herself and actually give us a presentation on attendance. Tabitha?
Hi, everybody. My name is Tabitha Jackson. I'm the Family Engagement Liaison Lead Facilitator here in MSD Warren Township. We are a large urban population on the far east side of Indianapolis. We have just about 12,000 students that we serve from preschool all the way through adult education. That does include an alternative school. And we are so excited to be a part of this grant and become a model site in Indiana. Our focus is really on sustaining a program, our family engagement program that we've had for the past 3 years, and really figuring out the best practices and how to sustain what we've already started. Our focus here in Warren Township is really on middle school, our grades 5 to 8. So we do intermediate middle school and really improving engagement at that level. I think we heard today that elementary, our parents are excited, and then something happens in that shift at that middle school level. So we're really trying to tap into that level and really get engagement up. Before this grant, though, we in Warren Township have had a really big focus on attendance and improving attendance rates, reducing our chronic absenteeism rates, and getting some systems into place that work for us. So with that being said, I'm going to do just a short presentation on what attendance looks like here in Warren Township. And hopefully you can take a few things away from today's presentation and implement in your schools to help improve attendance and get some things working. I am going to pull up my slideshow. All right, we all see that? All right, so I'm Tabitha. And today we are just going to talk about what makes attendance a success in MSD Warren Township and how we support our families who struggle with positive school attendance. So like I said, we are Warren Township. We serve about 12,000 students in our district, predominantly Black and Brown families. And we're located on the far east side of Indianapolis, and we are home of the Warriors. So today our attendance goal is about 92%. Last time I kind of did some numbers, it was about 92%. Our goal for our township is 97%, and that's the state goal, but also really what we're wanting our families to achieve. And every student, that goal is for every student. And we have been doing this work since 2022-2023 school year, and we have seen a consistent uptick in our attendance rates. One of the main things that we found that really helps improve attendance is building positive building culture and having that positive school culture. So how do we do that? Obviously through family engagement, that's a critical piece. We do school events, family empowerment nights, donuts with grown-ups, all pro dad, cookies and canvas, book fairs, grandparents day, parent groups. And I want to talk about the building culture and why school events are so important. We want our students to feel excited to come to school, to talk to their families about why I want to show up to school and what I'm missing out on, and really making school important. There's a great quote that I've heard from Dr. Jenel Janetti. She is an expert in attendance here in the state of Indiana and across the country. Attendance is belonging. When a student feels like they belong in their school, they will want to come to school. So those school events are really important to provide, making sure that they're fun and exciting, but also that they are hitting on that belonging piece. Another key thing that we do when our students miss a day, we welcome them back and really let them know, I missed you yesterday. Welcome back. Our class was not the same without you. Good to see you. You can find what you missed yesterday in your purple folder. And really welcoming that student back, not being punitive about it and making them feel shame that they missed out, and really letting them know that they were missed. Throughout our whole district, we are really big on attendance incentives. Some of the things that we do across the district at multiple grade levels are a Chip Chip Hooray attendance celebration. So when students have 97% or higher attendance for the month, some schools will host a Chip Chip Hooray. So kind of the play on the hip hip hooray, but it's Chip Chip, and they'll get a bag of chips, a brag tag. We really work with local businesses to provide coupons to our local roller skating rink, maybe a free meal to a local business or Sky Zone. We work with them a lot, just finding those free opportunities and partnering with local businesses to offer some incentives. Obviously, attendance certificates, improved attendance certificates, also a really big deal here in Warren Township. So if you had a rough start to the school year for X, Y, and Z reasons, but since November, you have been coming every day, we want to reward you for that and acknowledge you for that. And doing improved attendance certificates is also a really big thing. Attendance is really visible in all of our buildings, whether it is a bulletin board, sandwich board signs in the front office of our daily attendance percentage, how many students left early yesterday, how many tardies we had yesterday. Making attendance visible in our buildings is really important. And that's something that we have made a district standard across Warren. We also like to celebrate and announce daily attendance numbers for grade levels for certain classes. And again, just that communication about attendance is really vital to improving our attendance. We always are talking about it. We're always sharing it in newsletters with families, but also getting students excited. Did their class win today? Who knows? You got to wait for the daily announcement. So those are just some of the things that we are doing to incentivize attendance and make attendance fun here in Warren Township. We do a lot of classroom incentives. These are just some free ideas that are easy to do, are not a lot of lift, that we offer as incentives for our grades. So bubblegum party, dance parties, extra tech time, no shoes in the classroom, pajama day, show and tell is really popular. So really getting creative. Not all rewards have to cost money. One of our most popular ones is lunch in the classroom or a VIP lunch area. Our students really love to be able to invite a friend to one of the booths in the cafeteria for positive attendance. One of the biggest game changers for our district came in 2022, and that was the implementation of the attendance software Rawi. Rawi is a software system that provides early interventions to help identify students with possible attendance issues. And we do this, not everybody in the building has access to Rawi. We have a certain attendance team set up in every building. So every building knows who is directly working with Rawi, who is having certain conversations around Rawi and attendance, but really making sure that you have that attendance team is going to be critical. So what do we do when attendance is hard for families? We obviously, early identification is crucial. Just like with family engagement, building those relationships early and starting that positive conversation early is critical. Identifying students who possibly have attendance issues, supporting them and identifying them early is really important. And like I said, every building has an attendance team that works to support Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 families. Some of the immediate interventions that we do, we make phone calls, we send messages to caregivers, hey, reaching out as a courtesy. Olivia has had 4 missed days. They're all unexcused. And I just wanted to reach out, see what we could do to support, come up with a plan together to improve her attendance, and really supporting you so that Olivia gets to school more often. How can I help? It's not punitive. Attendance in Warren Township is not punitive. We really want to provide as many opportunities and resources and as possible. Some of those other interventions, we do family conferences. And now it's time to have some hard conversations. Home visits, we have attendance contracts, wraparound referral services, and then community referrals to outside organizations. We also like to, like I said, attendance is not punitive in Warren Township. We don't think that's the best way. And again, I think that is going back to trusting relationships with our families. If we're coming at a family saying, if you don't send your child to school, we're going to do this, this, and this, and so you better send them to school. Parents don't want to hear that. That's not the best way to approach them. So what we do, we really try and figure out what barriers to attendance our families have. So whether it's childcare, basic needs, clothing, food, housing, is the traditional school setting not the right fit for your student? What other options do we have? Is it a caregiving issue, adult education? Is it job training? Are there medical issues? Is it a mental health issue? Is it just a sense of, again, belonging? Do we need to connect this student with a mentor? So really trying to figure out what barriers are each and every family has to attendance, and how can we overcome that barrier? How can we help? So on the right side, you'll see that, like I said, our goal in Warren Township is not to be punitive when it comes to attendance. And we really want to offer any support that we possibly can before we actually have to, one, refer to DCS, refer to the prosecutor's office, or expel a student. And we know that this year with the new state law, SB, I think 82, Indiana is really looking at attendance this year, and especially those unexcused. So before we get to that referral to DCS, the prosecutor's office, we want to do whatever we can to connect you to the right resource and figure out what is going on with attendance. So I mentioned that we do family meetings with our families, and this is such a great visual that we get generated from our software, Rawi, and it is a great visual tool. I know I'm a visual person, and this printout comes directly from Rawi. So on it, it says, student has 5 absences, and then you'll see that red, orange, yellow, green, blue meter up there. And that is showing that your student is chronically absent at this point in the school year. The student is in the red. And it really shows, I think towards the bottom, it says, student has missed 280 minutes of educational time. So it's a really great visual tool to, again, provide clear attendance information to our families and why coming to school is so important. I think what we are really doing is figuring out, educating our parents as to why every absence is lost time in the classroom. So an absence is an absence, whether it's excused or unexcused. We want your child here as often as possible. So I just wanted to share this little screenshot of this report. It's such a great visual for our families. So that is what I have for attendance. I'm happy to take some questions on attendance and just chat with you.
I haven't had any questions posted on our chat box or in our Facebook Live.
Hey.
Just wondering if any of you use other software similarly, or if you have other systems like what Tabitha showed.
So I mentioned hi everyone, I'm also at MSD Warren Township. I mentioned in the group chat, but since we're kind of quiet, I'll just say it. Another visual that goes with the visual that Tabitha just put is the calendar. I usually put it on the back of that visual, and it's a calendar that shows the parents what days exactly that they missed, which helped out a lot because some parents will look at the date and say, oh, I actually have a medical excuse for that. I forgot to turn it in. And it allows us to go back and put it into our system to take away some of those unexcused absences that they have. So I find out every time we have an attendance meeting, I usually print both of those visuals off. And it's like Tabitha said, it's not punitive, but it just gives the parents an extra date, because when we have multiple children, it's easy to forget what days we didn't call in, or we did call in, and forget what days we have doctor's appointments and eye appointments. So it helps a lot with our parents. And I find out at my school that they really enjoy, or they like having that visual.
Mm-hmm. As for the middle school in our district, some of our parents, again, language barrier, excuse me, the easiest way for them is to take a photo or anything like that, and they send it to us. We have Parent Square. So that's how I do most of the attendance as well. Like if any parents have doctor notes or anything like that, I get it turned in for them, document it, and then we go about it.
to piggyback off of what Cheyenne was saying, that the additional attachment that goes with that calendar, it's always interesting to see a parent's face when you're having that conference with them and they see all those little red boxes that show that that's all those days that their kid was out. And it's like, oh, okay, I didn't quite realize it was that many. Seeing the number, hearing the number is one thing, and then visually seeing it, because it goes by month and it shows you exactly what days of every month that child was out, that it was whether it was excused or unexcused. It's eye-opening to them, and it's sometimes helpful because then they're paying more attention to how many times they allow that child to stay home sometimes when the reason is not necessarily a good one, so to speak.
Yes, and also just going off of what Keisha and Tabitha said, those loss of minutes, having those loss of minutes there, because we have some parents that'll come and say, oh, they were only late for 10 minutes. But if they're late for 10 minutes every day, that starts adding up, and they're saying, okay, well, maybe 10 minutes or even just 2 minutes, dropping them off early for 2 minutes in the morning, or dropping off late 2 minutes and then picking up early, 5-10 minutes. They're still losing those loss of minutes and loss of instruction. So when the parents see that, that kind of like shocks them as well. And they're like, oh, okay, it is crucial that even though it's just 2 minutes, those 2 minutes add up. So those three things, those three visuals really help out with our families, letting them know we're not trying to be punitive. We're just trying to give you the information that you don't see, but maybe we see on our end.
Yeah. And really having that clear guidelines and clear information going out to our families about our attendance expectations is something that we have been really diligent about in Warren Township. And this year so far, our attendance is soaring. We have buildings at 96% currently, which is incredible. And I think that it's the work that we have been doing for the past 3 years on attendance, but now we have the state to back us up with that. And I think that the communication and the media presence and the spotlight that the media has put on attendance in Indiana has really helped have some conversations here in Warren Township. It's not just us, the state is looking now too. And just having that conversation around attendance and making sure that our families understand why attendance every day counts is so important.
You have a comment in the chat box that says the calendar visually also shows a pattern. Does the child miss every Monday? Through conversation, maybe the child is with non-custodial parent on the weekend, for example.
Yep. Yeah, Rakisha, that's a great point. It really does. It finds those patterns. So it just really helps us do attendance in a very systematic and easy, approachable way so that we're able to quickly pick up on any patterns that are happening with a student's attendance so that we can provide those supports.
Well, Tabitha, thank you so much. I really appreciate the focus that you take on the positive side, the proactive, the systems preparation, not just focusing on the tools that we have for punishment now. So that was really a lovely presentation. And I just want to mention that, all 5 of the sites that you all are a part of, all of you are moving into leadership roles similar to as Warren has provided here. So as our center grows, we're really looking for more of you to step up and be willing to share and serve in these leadership roles and helping our state to sharpen our family engagement practices. So thank you everyone for taking your morning this morning. It was just a delightful experience to be with you. And I look forward to spending more time with you in the future.
Can everybody see that one okay? All right.
Thank you, everyone. Please stay connected. We've got a lot of growing and learning to do together.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.